One of the most significant aspects of religion is the space in which the event or performance occurs. So I want us to look briefly at sacred space, the architecture or how space is set up and structured in religion. Religion itself denotes place, meaning it has to occur somewhere. It creates a field and a dimension of separation and distinction. And you're going to hear me go back to this a couple of times in this slideshow. This separation, this distinction is between that which is holy, or the religious event itself, and that which is profane or ordinary during the day. For all people, for all religious practitioners, space itself is heterogeneous. It is not homogeneous. What this means is that there are interruptions as we interpret and experience religious events. Some areas are more sacred or more profane than others. For all people, space itself has these designations. So when we even think of our home, there are areas in our own home, in our own personal space, which are more ordinary and less ordinary. Two important questions to think about when we consider religious space. How does the society designate? And designate literally means to mark out or point out or draw a sign upon a place. How does the society designate sacred space? It includes the Latin word signum, which means a sign or a mark. The second question is, how is the society influenced or affected by sacred space? In other words, how does behavior change from use in one area to another? One of the people who has most studied the use of sacred space is an individual named Mircea Eliade. He is a historian of religion, and he was also an anthropologist, and his most famous work is from 1957, The Sacred and the Profane. And again, you hear that Durkheimian term. Eliade was quite affected by Durkheim. Eliade argues that the single most important characteristic of religion is its separation or its distinction between that which is sacred or sacred space, space which is mysterious, has some kind of connection with the supernatural, and is awe-inspiring, and space which is profane, which is natural, knowable, and where everyday events occur. He says that these are not always wholly discrete areas. Sometimes the sacred emerges from the profane. So you may consider religious events where that occur on very profane sites where some type of historical event has occurred. These spaces are not totally unconnected one with the other. Eliade draws our attention to the concept of hierophany, and I want to make sure we understand that before we go any further. Hierophany is a place where something sacred emerges, where it is believed to have occurred. So the manifestation of the sacred within a natural and profane world creates a place which is contagioned by or affected by the presence of the sacred. And so that area becomes most holy. That is a place of hierophany, where the sacred manifested itself. It could be an altar of any type, including a mound of rocks, but it is a place where nature becomes transformed by the existence of the sacred. Eliade distinguishes sacred and profane in three dimensions, so he defines sacred space as having these three particular characteristics. First, all sacred space has a fixed point from which orientation takes place. It is called the axis mundi, or the central part from which all creation occurs. When you think of a Christian church, even a Muslim temple, you're thinking of a space in which there is a progression towards a more holy area. For a Christian church, you're looking at an altar. In Muslim space, the further in the temple that you come, you're getting closer towards that center point. But all sacred space has the idea that, again, there are distinctions even within the sacred space itself, and the axis mundi is that point where hierophany has occurred. So sacredness emanates out from that center point. The second characteristic of sacred space is that it has a threshold at the point of entrance. It's a place where sacred and profane meet. So it is at that threshold where communication and transition actually occur. Thresholds in sacred areas are often considered very dangerous because it's a passage point. Third, all sacred space serves as an imago mundi, meaning that it alone encapsulates the fullness of the world. It is a point of cosmogony, if you will, the way people perceive their God's being in the world. So the sacred space becomes the ideal world itself, written in small form. So it's a copy or a diminished version, or you may even call it an avatar, if you will, of what real space should be, the most sacred space should be, what our world should be like in an ideal sort of way. I want you to think about this. Eliade argues that Western man lives increasingly in a desacralized cosmos. We are no longer subsumed in the religious. Do you agree with this? I suggest to you that we can still see traces in Western society of things that move us personally and take on a sacred aura. I want you to think about your own lives. Do you have a sense of sacred space? Do you think it's comparable to that we would find in less urban environments or less urban societies?